Here it is, Patrick. The ultimate prank. Invisible spray.
What are we gonna do with it?
I know. We'll go spray the park bench and then sit on it. And when people walk by, we'll be floating in midair.
They're floating in midair!
How do they do that?
Ahoy, mateys, and welcome again to another episode of I'm Ready, a SpongeBob SquareCast. I'm your host, Captain Eric, and it is episode 128 of the SquareCast. We are finishing our sail through the third season today. This is it, ladies and gentlemen. Pranks-a-Lot, the final episode of SpongeBob's third season, and also the final episode for a long time that would feature any main contributions from series creator Stephen Hillenburg, who of course would finish up with the third season in 2002 to focus on the SpongeBob SquarePants movie for its 2004 release, which in Hillenburg's mind was the end of the series. We have Pranks-a-Lot, which of course is the final episode of the TV series, but the SpongeBob SquarePants movie is a bit of a finality for the SpongeBob world. Plankton digging up his final plan, actually getting the Krabby Patty formula, making Krabby Patties, seeing it through to where he's actually in control of Bikini Bottom, and then, SpongeBob finally becoming manager of a restaurant that we never see for the rest of the series. That was Stephen Hillenburg's idea, but also knew, hey, if Nickelodeon is going to continue this show, it's going to have to stay fresh. It's going to have to see new blood through it, because it's going to have to keep engaging viewers and not just rehash the same stories over and over and over again. And for that to happen, there's going to have to be a new captain at the head of the ship. Now, if Hillenburg had gotten his way, this, for all intent and purposes, was the final episode of SpongeBob SquarePants. As far as a series finale is concerned, look, there are rare, very rare, perfect series finales. Even when that comes to mind, I can only think of maybe one or two shows that I would deem as, decent series finales. Breaking Bad, regular show. I don't know why that's the first two to come to mind, but Ed, Edd n Eddy's Big Picture Show, maybe the third option there. Either way, this isn't a series finale. SpongeBob SquarePants would go on for many seasons, for many years, and as of the recording of this episode, is still in production with new episodes, new writers, and new blood within SpongeBob, continuing it for a whole new generation. But I'm sure there is a multiverse out there where this was just the final episode. Nickelodeon would have never advertised it as a series finale. Let me also make that clear too. They never did that with most of their final episodes of cartoons. It would just be a new episode, even though it was the final episode. Sometimes the final episode might get a bigger promotion than others, but for a lot of Nicktoons, the final episode was just, hey, new episode this Friday. That was it. Just par of the course. No special fanfare. The episode would air. It would just happen, and then it'd be over, and that was it. Nickelodeon would never make mention as the show being over. It would just air in reruns, slowly wean itself off of the network, and then it would probably be more seen on Nicktoons Network and then on streaming services. So in that multiverse, if Hillenburg had gotten his way, this episode just airs. The SpongeBob SquarePants movie comes out, is as successful as it was, and who knows what happens in that world? Because guess what? In our world, Stephen Hillenburg eventually came back to the series. Eventually, he felt that there was more to contribute and more he could do, and that's exciting. That is exciting. For as long as the trip in One Piece has been, for those who are following Luffy and the Straw Hat Pirates, I have my own journey in front of me as well. And for as long as it may be, I can see some treacherous waters, but I also see some pretty exciting things long on the far other side of this adventure. So the end of Season 3 is not going to be any bigger than the end of Season 4 and Season 5. It's big, obviously, for certain reasons of this being Hillenburg's last time being noted as the executive producer at the end of the series. Among a few other names that we have been very accustomed to the show up to this point that we won't be seeing as main contributors on the show anymore. In fact, this is the last episode to have Derek Dryman, Caleb Muner, Carson Kugler, Ken Osborne, and Meriwether Williams' name in the opening credits. And those are names that, for longtime listeners of the show, or even if you stopped, those are names I've been saying since season 1. So, now I'm going to have a separate episode of the Squarecast, kind of just divulging these, we're ending the golden era, the golden age of SpongeBob. We're going to have an episode kind of going over that and giving credit to all of these names and all of the work they've done proper, instead of just, dumping that here on the Pranks-A-Lot episode. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, this is a big episode in a small but big way. It is also the easiest episode of SpongeBob SquarePants to be drawn, I got to imagine, in the show's history, as I imagine the animation department doing backflips over the content in this episode. This episode, Pranks-A-Lot, first premiered in America on October 11th, 2004, although it first premiered in Canada, our neighbors to the north, on November 19th, 2002. Yeah. Think about that. Think about that gap. Now, Nickelodeon in the United States were stretching out the airings of, they were also juggling a lot of the episodes of SpongeBob SquarePants throughout the months, throughout the years, first few seasons here. And it's not uncommon for that to happen now, for seasons to air out of order, to just fit different, times, those special episodes especially. You want to talk about an episode getting aired out of order, not to divulge from SpongeBob, but since the Spectre Deflector by name is mentioned in this episode, I think it's fair to mention the Danny Phantom Undergrowth episode, Urban Jungle, a part of the 3rd season of Danny Phantom. I think it was like episode 5 or 6 of Danny Phantom of that season. And even though you can certainly enjoy episodes of Danny Phantom without watching episode to episode, it wasn't that much of a serialized show, though it did keep continuity happening, including certain people that Danny had met in previous episodes that, for some reason, this was the first episode of season 3 that Nickelodeon was airing. They just promoted it as this big special, even though it was just a normal episode of Danny Phantom, but they made a big deal out of it, and they never aired those previous episodes of season 3, so there were moments in this episode that just, everybody was lost, like, okay, they're just dumping this stuff on us, like, all right, like, are they gaslighting us and saying that this stuff happened earlier? And it did, but we never got those episodes before. That happens all the time in SpongeBob, but usually those big episodes, there isn't really continuity and serialized content between SpongeBob that you have to follow. Although, coming up to the title zone this upcoming fall, I don't know, things might get more canonized and connected than we really know or expect. So I'm sure we'll find out more of that. But on to Pranks-A-Lot. To give credit, this also aired in the UK and in Ireland on May 10th, 2003, in Australia on August 6th, 2003, and it actually premiered in the United States on January 6th, 2004, through DVD. It's one of those episodes that if you happen to purchase a SpongeBob DVD ahead of time, it was one of the episodes included, and you just got to enjoy it long before it officially premiered on Nickelodeon. This episode was written by Paul Tibbitt, Ken Osborne, and Meriwether Williams. Our storyboard artists are Carson Kugler, Caleb Muner, and William Reese. Our storyboard directors are Paul Tibbitt and Ken Osborne. Our animation director is Andrew Overtomb. Our creative director is Derek Dryman, and our executive producer is Stephen Hillenberg. I think it's interesting that in the first episode of SpongeBob SquarePants, not only are we introduced to SpongeBob, but we're introduced to a new location within Bikini Bottom, the Krusty Krab. Now, the characters know about it ahead of time, but hey, as the viewer, this is our introduction to the Krusty Krab. And here in what was Steven Hillenburg's last episode of SpongeBob, we are introduced to a new location in Bikini Bottom and a new character within that location. The location I'm talking about is the Palace of Pranks. And unlike the Krusty Krab, which was very unwelcome to SpongeBob, mainly due to Squidward, Mr. Krabs seemed pretty welcome. Of course, hey, as long as you have $1 in your pocket, you're welcome inside the Krusty Krab. And it was mainly Squidward, obviously because he's neighbors with SpongeBob, that didn't want him being there, and that rubbed off on Mr. Krabs because, hey, Mr. Krabs has Squidward as a worker, trusts him, trusts his opinion, doesn't want SpongeBob there. But in this last episode, SpongeBob is not only welcome at the Palace of Pranks, but the owner, Frank, absolutely loves SpongeBob because SpongeBob is his #1 customer. So this is where SpongeBob, if he has any extra income whatsoever, he is spending it at the Palace of Pranks. He sees Frank as the absolute king of pranks, the prank master, and that he has done it all. He has seen it all, done it all, and I doubt that, but I'm also not going to discredit Frank's, his black belt and prankery, as game recognizes game, because as a black belt myself, I can see a man of an acquired taste. As far as the pranks I have pulled in my life, I certainly could write a book where each chapter tells a different prank I have pulled. As through my younger years and adolescence into my teenage days, I was a bit of a Bart Simpson, a bit of a menace through the neighborhoods. Ding dong ditch, prank calls, even to the point that when I first had the ability to drive, my friends and I would go and prank every single drive-through in what apparently is the capital of fast food drive-throughs in our state. Not only that, I think it has the Guinness Book World Record for most fast food chains in a square mile or something. So we would just drive around and I swear I have people I could call and verify this even right now. But at the time, my first vehicle was from my grandfather. It was a 1997 Oldsmobile LSS, an absolutely fantastic luxury car that my grandfather took care of, but unfortunately didn't take care of it enough in the colder climates up in Vermont because it was rusting from the outside, but the inside, man, he took care of that thing. And the way it drove, my friends would all call it the boat, which is honestly where the name Captain Eric came from. So in an interesting way, right here in the end of my third season, sharing some information for you. The way it drove on highways and on long roads, it cruised. It had a smoothness to it, and there was an almost slight rocking, not enough to make, I'm not bringing that up to say seasickness or anything like that, not that kind of boat action, but it had a movement about it that when my friends once mentioned that it was boat-like a speedboat, that's what it was deemed, and Captain Eric was kind of born in that way, in some regard. But yeah, we would drive that boat around to all the different fast food chains, and just very light pranks, nothing serious, nothing crazy, not to get anyone freaked out or the cops called. We just had very, small, mindful pranks. For example, I worked for one of these fast food chains, something that America runs on, and I knew that we had a ton of discontinued items, donuts, drinks. Oops, did I just name drop something? But I knew a lot that we were out of, so even going to one of their drive-thrus, which, in that town there was 10 of them, you just go up and you just start ordering all this stuff that they don't make, and if you just keep going, the person can't really cut you off, and they might try, and that's just a very light prank. You get a laugh out of it, you drive on, and hopefully in some regard, in some time, the person on the other end of a good prank can see the humor of it. That's the sign of a good prank, is if somebody can eventually just go, oh my goodness, like, wow, that was really good. Or if they just even laugh at it, that's all you can really ask for. As far as ding dong ditching is concerned, I would really only try to hit people I knew so that if I did get caught, I wouldn't have to deal with somebody I didn't know. There was more of a fear of that. I'm not saying I didn't do that, but I didn't like the feeling. But yeah, one of my best friend's dads, we ding-donged his house so much in one night. Like, we would wait in very mindful intervals across the street into when we would ring that doorbell. But eventually this man got so fed up that he came outside, and this was like 1 a.m, so it wasn't like an appropriate time to be doing this, I acknowledge, but came outside in his whitey tighties with a bat, like a Louisville Slugger, on the front lawn, and just looked like we're out across the street in the bushes just staring at him like, oh my goodness, does he see us? And he's just looking around, can't see a soul in the streets, in the bushes, anywhere. And eventually he just yells out, "You goddamn kids!" And we were laughing in the bushes across the street. And, hey, eventually, years later, when we finally told good old Neil about what had happened, he laughed about it. He absolutely laughed about it. So a good prank, even if it takes time, somebody on the other end will acknowledge that it's good. But a bad prank can always have repercussions. You gotta think about these things before you follow through. If you have a prankster in your soul, and this is coming from someone with a black belt in it, I will say you have to be mindful on what you're doing and who you're doing it to. You mess with the wrong person, some people don't have a comedic outlook. And sometimes if you don't think of what you're doing, your prank may be really hurtful and could really cause harm to people. So if you are pranking anyone out there, keep things light. Be on the frank side of things, other than one of his items, which we will get to. But talking about not thinking of a prank through and how people can handle it, look at the first prank that happens in this episode. SpongeBob pulls out the classic, spring snakes jumping out of a can gag, where you hand somebody a can and they open it up and they're supposed to get spooked by the snakes. It's a can of C-nut brittle that, even though Patrick has apparently already been fooled with this prank, just goes ham anytime he sees a can of C-nut brittle, opens it up and doesn't even get scared of the snakes that pop out, is just upset and even cries over there not being C-nut brittle inside of the can. So you can really hurt somebody's feelings, even with a harmless prank. And I'm telling you that from experience. I have pranks that I would say have been completely harmless, but hey, some people take things the wrong way. That's why you have to be careful. You got to be mindful, and especially learn from your mistakes. But as SpongeBob is exploring the store, Patrick gets fooled with another C-nut brittle can, which I got to imagine he just must have seen the entire shelf of them, went nuts, and what a dud for him. But as Frank is introduced, this eye-patched elderly fish who just clearly has a heart of gold, just has a lot of love in his soul for laughter. I mean, to the point that he now owns the Palace of Pranks, an entire novelty store of all these like cheap gags, which I can't tell you the last time I was in an actual like gag store like this, like a prank store. I've been in a magic shop once. I would say, other than a Halloween store, it's probably the closest to the Palace of Pranks that I've ever been into. But does anyone out there know of an actual like store like this, like a prank shop? I've seen it so many times in cartoons, and I just, in my life, I've never come across one. I'm sure they exist. I wonder how close they are to me. Like genuine, as goofy as some of the stuff is in here, that's what I'm talking about. Including Frank's opening gag, the classic joy buzzer, which I have also seen in so many cartoons. Like, I feel like that's a classic, like, Looney Tunes level gag. But I always feel like the ones that I've seen in person, you know, they're plastic, and they don't really shock. I've always wanted to get my hands on a real classic style joy buzzer. Really give somebody that jolt. I don't want to be like Harley Race and walk around with an actual, like, one of those classic tasers. The one that when you turn them on, they have that really disgusting sounding noise. Ugh, hate it. But Frank here, voiced by D. Bradley Baker, who we have mentioned many times on the Squarecast, one of the greatest voice actors of our time, still ongoing in the world of voice acting, but just is known for so many characters, even in the world of Bikini Bottom. To give him credit, Squilliam Fancy Son, Bubble Bass, and Perch Perkins, among many other fish within Bikini Bottom, including Frank, the owner and proprietor of the Palace of Pranks. But as he is excited to show off a few other new items that have come into the store, he brings the boys over to the counter and shows off exploding chewing gum, which the one gum-related prank that comes to mind that I know of are those little, like, fake packs of gum that have the one stick pulling out that it gives you an electric shock when somebody pulls it, as it completes the connection when you pull it out to a certain point, and it gives the person holding it a bit of a jolt there. That's the first gum-related prank that comes to mind. I really don't know of an exploding chewing gum prank equivalent. Maybe some, like, fake gum, like Bertie Bott's every flavor beans, but just the gum version of that where you hand somebody, you're like, oh yeah, this is cherry. And they're like, no, it's blood. Ha, you got to chew that now. And maybe not exactly that flavor, but there's got to be some fake gum flavors out there that are meant for pranking. Sorry to any of the vampires out there, especially Nosferatu. Sorry to you, bud. Maybe blood gum does exist. I don't know. But anyway, so we get to the exploding gum, which is an interesting prank. SpongeBob apparently only has $1 on him, or he only wants to spend $1 at this time, because he asks, what will a dollar get him? And this is a great gag, but $1 will get you a fake dollar, and you could fool people into thinking that you have $1, or you can give it to them and go, ha, that's fake. So Frank is apparently selling counterfeit dollars at the Palace of Pranks that cost $1. There's no reason to do this other than if you just need a prop dollar and you don't want to, tear a real one. I guess the transfer is fair. $1 for $1. A whoopee cushion apparently costs $1 these days, and that's a good classic prank. And I also know that there are plenty of teachers out there who do not like the whoopee cushion. And yes, I have pulled a whoopee cushion on a teacher prank at least twice, and one of them was a real good sport about it. I had this one whoopee cushion that was like a guaranteed, it was made in like the late 90s. It wasn't a classic whoopee cushion that you blew up. It was one that would like re-expand itself, but it was guaranteed every time somebody sat down on it to get a good sounding fart noise. And at least one teacher really enjoyed having that moment and having all the kids laugh, for them sitting down and then all the kids would laugh. On the other hand, there was another teacher that did not find that amusing whatsoever, and they were completely embarrassed by the idea of farting. I'm sure they would laugh about it now. I'm sure of it, but yeah, they were certainly not happy about that then. They passed on the whoopee cushion. Fake vomit, which is a classic gag. It's a classic prank. I've seen fake vomit sold in novelty sections of shops like Spencer's Gifts. But then also, when the boys pass on the fake vomit, Frank has real vomit, which, just for you SpongeBob aficionados out there, is our first ever appearance of fake vomit in a SpongeBob SquarePants episode. But Frank has saved the best for last of some products for the boys. The piece de la resistance of his collection. For any master prankster, the invisible spray. Apparently a paint that when applied can make any surface translucent. Completely translucent. And all of a sudden, SpongeBob has more than $1 because he buys the invisible spray. The original plan for SpongeBob and Patrick, in their thoughts, was to spray a park bench and sit on it and just freak out all the other citizens of Bikini Bottom into thinking that they're floating. And that was their whole idea for the spray. Once they got it, that was the one prank they came up with. But Frank had warned them. Frank, of the Palace of Pranks, warned them that the paint on this product stains clothing. And with that in mind, Patrick is extra careful before they're ever even going to use this paint, as he just removes his pants. And we have ourselves a naked Patrick, where when SpongeBob is reminded of the possibility of this staining their clothes, also removes his pants as well, SpongeBob Naked Pants, which, by the way, one of the working titles for this episode apparently was at one point Naked Pants, as some streaming services have listed Naked Pants as this episode, and it's been found in some certain regards. So we have here SpongeBob Naked Pants and Patrick Naked Star, and their clothes on the ground, and before they could even spray the park bench, end up spraying their clothing. And now they're stuck naked, fighting over this can of paint, in which a bus of, I guess they're doing a tour of Bikini Bottom, or they're just having a moment seeing these two naked idiots fighting over this can of spray paint. They stop and announce it pretty much for all of these people to take pictures. Fortunately for you, I don't have any stories to bring up of a loss of clothing and having to scurry around in the nude. So consider yourself lucky. But lucky for SpongeBob and Patrick, they don't have to worry about being seen, as they have a can of invisible spray, and one after another, they spray each other down, angrily at first. They're not really, doing this for a purpose other than, oh, you sprayed me, I'm spraying you. And it just goes back and forth until all of a sudden, both SpongeBob and Patrick are completely invisible. And this is where the animators took a breath, opened up the shades, saw the sunshine, as for the rest of the episode, for the most part, there is no SpongeBob and Patrick in physical appearance. We hear SpongeBob and Patrick. Trust me, Tom Kenny and Bill Fagerbaki are not taking a day off on this episode. The animators for them certainly are. But SpongeBob and Patrick are completely invisible. And it's just so funny to have the backgrounds, you have these zoom-in shots. They animated the backgrounds in the exact same way they would as if the two characters were having a conversation side by side, and it's hilarious. There's no character models. And through an interaction with somebody in Bikini Bottom, discovered the possibilities of the prank that they have fallen into. They don't have to just go sit on an invisible bench to pull a prank. Since they're invisible, they themselves are the prank. And were perceived as ghosts. Which, I mean, if we're on the subject as far as ghosts are concerned, I can't be a person that says, no, they don't exist. I don't have enough evidence to say that. There are more than enough pieces of video evidence online, and I'm not just saying like fake level stuff, paranormal activity, that there's a string in there. Go and look up Nuke's Top 5 if you want to see some videos, a very objective view at videos that are sent in from supermarkets, from CCTV cameras, video feeds that can't be edited. I don't know. There's enough smoke out there to make me go, there's something. I just don't know what it is. But I can't say that there's nothing, because there's something. But it's certainly not people spraying themselves down with invisible spray, or anybody using an invisible cloak for that matter. But it's really funny to see SpongeBob and Patrick have such enthusiasm to spook people as ghosts when they've had the ability under the tutelage of the Flying Dutchman to scare the citizens of Bikini Bottom, and they just couldn't do it right. Maybe it's just because they were being seen, and the only real way to effectively scare people with SpongeBob and Patrick is to not see him. Maybe that was just the missing cure all along, Flying Dutchman, but I think he'd be proud with what they're able to accomplish in this episode. But they start off with Sandy off the bat, who I was shocked to hear this piece of information, but this is the first time in the third season of SpongeBob SquarePants that we're visiting Sandy's tree dome, which feels wrong. But then I went back and I couldn't find an episode in which we really hung out with Sandy or did anything with her. And it just, maybe they felt like they exhausted too much of Sandy throughout the second season and just decided to kind of push her to the background a bit more, because, man, if there's one character in the SpongeBob SquarePants movie that really gets the shaft on their appearance, it's Sandy, who gets pretty much 2 lines throughout the movie and is completely forgotten about. The most interesting aspect of the takeover of Bikini Bottom would have been how Plankton took control of Sandy, who up to that point we were told is the strongest character in Bikini Bottom, and then is ignored. Maybe they thought they overused her. They just made her too strong, too powerful. She's just got to take a back seat. I have no idea. It would be interesting to ask those behind the scenes what they thought of Sandy throughout this third season. But yeah, this was the one appearance of the Tree Dome in which SpongeBob and Patrick go into her treehouse, by the way, somehow without their helmets, because they ran out of invisible spray. And also, knowing what we know later in the episode, water was obviously going to wash off any of the paint that was on their faces, so if they put on those helmets, their faces would be seen. And they would just be heads floating in a bowl, which probably still would have scared Sandy. But I digress. It's interesting. They went in completely dry on this one. Somehow they were also able to change all of Sandy's pictures into pictures of Patrick, and don a sheet look over themselves to give off the impression that they are terrible ghosts, or fake ghosts, hiding in sheets. Very much reminding me of Beetlejuice, specifically the Maitlands and their first attempt at haunting the Dietzes out of their house and donning like just classic sheets that, when photographed, can't be seen and just seem like actual floating sheets. And that's what happens here as Sandy rips off the sheets. She hears SpongeBob and Patrick, feels comfortable, like, all right, you guys, you're just trying to spook me, pulls off the sheets and sees nothing. And Sandy runs out of the treehouse, into an escape pod, out of the tree dome, out of the ocean, landing all the way back in Texas. Which is really interesting if Sandy had not appeared later on in the episode. If that was our last shot of Sandy, it would have almost solidified a bit of this being a final episode, not given the fact that Sandy would also appear in the SpongeBob movie. But, I mean, did she?
I don't know.
Right after Sandy, they decide to go after Mrs. Puff, who they just eat up her chocolate cake that she was about to enjoy, and blows up as she usually does as the puffer fish that she is. But this is also the first time that we're seeing her deflate back down to size, where she literally deflates almost like a balloon, where she's just a flat creature right after that happens. Then they go after Squidward. Squidward is the next one of their wrath. Very simple little paint job of a curly mustache on Squidward, disrupting his little paint session, can send him running straight out of his Easter Island head. And we are told that every citizen in Bikini Bottom has been scared or spooked by this ghost epidemic, other than one man. The news is announcing that one man is the only one to not be spooked by ghosts. Is like it's announcing to the world, like, hey, the ghosts should come attack this guy. But it's the only Mr. Krabs. Apparently, Mr. Krabs is the only one in town, and is even announcing to the world through the newspaper that there's just no way that he's going to get scared, almost like as a challenge to the ghost. All right, that moved on its own. Anyway, since Mr. Krabs has been built up as the final target for SpongeBob and Patrick, we now visit the Krusty Krab and see to the extent as to how serious Mr. Krabs takes his anti-ghost mentality. It's not just for him to say, oh, I don't believe in ghosts and move on. In some regard, he actually does believe in some supernatural presence, but just believes, I don't think he could get spooked by it because he has a whole laundry list of items on his person that are meant to keep ghosts away or supernatural beings. Wearing a spotted handkerchief, and as his quote is, no ghost will come near a fella as long as he has these items: a spotted handkerchief on, carrying a dried up sea leprechaun, wearing a gold necklace, and I gotta just say, foxy grandpa indeed. Am I right, ladies? Wearing his pants in a Melvin knot, which apparently means stringing up his underwear in a rope where it's like knotted up and like giving himself a wedgie kind of way. So yeah, the Melvin knot. Wearing his shivering timber brace, which appears to be shackles around his ankles, a more wooden kind of shackle. Wearing a piece of duct tape on the back of his neck to cover the hairs. And for those that don't get that, that's a reference to those who, feel a cold presence, feel the hairs on the back of your neck rise a little bit. It's that goosebumps feeling. Yeah, that's in reference to that. So him kind of keeping those hairs down so he doesn't have to feel that. Wearing a suit of anti-ghost armor, which I gotta say isn't anything you're gonna find in the Fenton Works lab for anti-ghost armor, as it's just a wooden barrel with some sort of headpiece. And most importantly, his Spectre deflector, which is a piece of ghost hunting material found in the Fenton Works lab, more of a belt, but for Mr. Krabs, it is simply a paddle ball, which is just interesting. I wonder if it's going to work, as the ghosts have made their way to the Krusty Krab and are bringing a haunting to Mr. Krabs, who apparently is not as tough against ghosts as he bolstered to be. He actually turns out to be pretty afraid of them. And SpongeBob and Patrick even go to the point of potentially burning an actual dollar in front of Mr. Krabs, although I have to imagine that it's probably the fake dollar. They wouldn't actually risk a real dollar here. Or maybe they would. It is SpongeBob and Patrick. But when a flame is going to be introduced to a dollar, a potential life being for Mr. Krabs, he spares no second in dousing a bucket of water onto that flame, and in doing so, completely takes off the paint of SpongeBob and Patrick, revealing themselves.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
To the man himself, who realizes, oh, the ghosts terrorizing the town are actually SpongeBob and Patrick this entire time, realizes more in his head as he is concocting a scheme while SpongeBob and Patrick are just laughing maniacally at the idea of them burning this dollar, because they're just still holding it there laughing. But as they come to and realize that the paint has been taken off, and now they are in front of Mr. Krabs completely nude, and also, hey, we are the ghosts that have been terrorizing this town. Though Mr. Krabs lets it be known that he's hip and he can handle a prank. And I do think this is a clear nod to Born Again Krabs, and Mr. Krabs in some way getting a bit of revenge here for that end moment. For not only putting him through a completely boring night as they promised an exciting one, but for goading him into breaking into his mother's house and breaking into her drawer with her bloomers.
Frilly things! We hit the jackpot!
And causing him that level of embarrassment. Even if it was just his mother that had to know about it, it was still enough that I'm sure that embarrassment sat with him. And it was in this moment that once the paint came off of SpongeBob and Patrick, that Mr. Krabs in his head concocted one quick plan, as he rest assures SpongeBob and Patrick that he's okay, he's hip, he's fine, he can handle a prank, and they should just leave the bathroom, because they're in the bathroom of the Krusty Krab here, which, by the way, for this episode, for some reason, the entrance of this bathroom gets moved over to where Mr. Krabs' office is, which is just pretty interesting. But as they exit the bathroom, a spotlight is put onto our naked undersea friends as it is revealed that the entire Krusty Krab is filled with the citizens of Bikini Bottom, very much like Culture Shock, where everybody was just at all those tables looking at that one stage. And here's the spotlight from Mr. Krabs announcing to everybody, hey, here's your ghosts, the naked SpongeBob and Patrick. Try to cover themselves up in various ways, as even Sandy came back from Texas to lurk at the two ghosts and somehow whistle at them through her helmet. An incredible feat that only Sandy could do. But this is how the episode ends. The embarrassment of SpongeBob and Patrick. Two characters who, I gotta say, SpongeBob in particular rarely ever gets a comeuppance in these episodes, even when he might be the cause of something or the introduction of something to another character who eventually has to take a downfall. It's nice that in a light way, SpongeBob has to deal with this level of embarrassment at the end of this episode. And that, my friends, is the end of the third season of SpongeBob SquarePants. We have made it. We have pulled it into port. A time to take a rest and a time to anticipate some new and exciting adventures ahead. Now, before we move on to the fourth season of SpongeBob SquarePants, we're going to have a few other episodes here devoted to other means. Of course, I'm going to be ranking my episodes of the third season next week here on the show. So we'll go through all of the episodes. I'm going to rank them. I may also do a ranking of all the third season here. How does Captain Eric's list here? I don't want to do that right afterwards, but I might slip that in right before season 4 starts as an extra bonus. Or I might have that at the end of the season 3 listings as an extra. I haven't decided just yet, but I will at some point. But we'll have the rankings. We have the SpongeBob SquarePants movie. We have the SpongeBob SquarePants movie game, which will also include any extra smaller SpongeBob games that have been released up to this point. It'll just kind of be a game smorgasbord before we move on. And then I do want to include one episode that focuses more on Steven Hillenburg, his contributions to the show, those who have worked on the show up to this point that I may have not mentioned, and just to kind of wrap a little bow here on the golden era of SpongeBob before we place it down. We can sit it here and appreciate it, but then we have to move on to newer and fresh territory for SpongeBob SquarePants. Not only that, we're moving on to an almost new art style as Marker Bob, as he is known, is left in season 3, and also the ink and paint stylings of this era of SpongeBob, where we move on to a digital era of SpongeBob SquarePants that we get to enjoy for the next 4 seasons. A digital version of SpongeBob SquarePants before they eventually bring back that ink and paint method, which I'm so glad they did. But I certainly don't want to disparage anyone who worked in the digital era. There is a lot to love here, and we're starting out with a banger. I actually enjoy the season 4 premiere a lot, so it'll be a fun time, but it'll be a bit before we get there. And I thank you for being along for the ride. I thank you for being a part of the Ready crew. It is always a pleasure, and with that, that's our time together aboard. Thank you for being a part of my Ready crew. You can reach Captain Eric at spongepodpodcast@gmail.com, where you can also follow me on Twitter at I'mReadyPodcast or on Instagram at SpongeBobPodcast. Please check out my other podcast, This Week in Nickelodeon History, dropping every Sunday on most conceivable podcasting platforms. And also, don't forget to subscribe to the Captain Eric YouTube channel, where you can also hit that bell so you can be notified anytime the Captain puts something out. And also, just so you know, episode 125 is now on YouTube. My interview with Shift, the streamer and the speedrun record holder of Battle for Bikini Bottom, in full video form, a beautiful little world that I've placed Shift and I in, where you can see the Captain in full glory along with Shift. I think we had an absolutely wonderful conversation, and I hope to one day have him on again with a proper episode of SpongeBob that we can talk about, and that'll be a fun time down the line. You can also purchase new and updated merch at the Redbubble link, either in the podcast description or in the link from any of my socials. There's going to be some new designs coming up before the 4th season premiere of the Squarecast, so certainly if you haven't checked Redbubble in a while, go back and check that soon. But as always, anything that comes in from my projects goes directly back into my projects, and it is so appreciated across the board. I love you guys. And thank you. Thank you for being a part of this. This is actually a big deal for me personally, because this is it. This is like the safe SpongeBob era for me is really over, in the terms that we're now getting into seasons where there might be episodes I haven't seen either at all or I haven't seen since it first premiered. I have a weird relationship with these next few seasons, and I certainly haven't gotten to enjoy the return of Steven Hillenburg, knowing that I'm doing this podcast. And honestly, I'd like to have episodes that I haven't watched and get to give you my first impressions here. That's kind of half the point. So this is exciting. I'm kind of ready to be done with the safe SpongeBob seasons. Not that I don't like being just super positive all the time, but I feel like it's almost like your tires can be spinning in the mud sometimes here when it's just giving praise each and every episode, because I undoubtedly love these seasons and episodes just as much as I'm sure you do. So I hope you enjoyed my show thus far. Thank you for coming aboard. Thank you for being a part of my life, a part of the Ready crew. And as always, as I like to end all of my programs, please stay safe out there. Be kind to one another, and come aboard again to another episode of I'm Ready, a SpongePod Squarecast.
That Mr. Krabs, always looking out for me. What a guy.
Yeah. The Krusty Krab presents Live Nude Pranksters, starring the Bikini